Hi guys, so today we are doing the notes for 3-3, fractions, decimals, and percents. So the assessment questions we need to know are what are the relationships between those three things and how can you represent the same number as a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. Okay, so let's think about some questions. What do I need to multiply fractions? So for fractions, you need to have a numerator and a denominator, and another numerator and a denominator. Remember, if you don't have a fraction already set up, if it's a whole number, you can always put it over a 1, right? We've been doing that pretty easy, right? Multiplication and division, the relationship is that dividing is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal, right? Remember that. Okay. And the reciprocal is when you take a fraction, for example, this 2 over 3, and you flip it over, and that would be 3 over 2. But you guys are pros at that by now, so we don't need to review that so much. Okay, ratios, fractions, decimals, and percents are all just different representations of the same number. For example, 1/2 can be represented as, if it was a ratio, right? You had 4 girls and 4 boys in the same class. That would be half, or girls, half, or boys. 1/2, 0.5, 9 over 18, or 50%. Those are all equivalent to 1/2. Okay? It is very helpful to be able to convert a number to whatever representation you might need. Because sometimes you need percentages, sometimes you need straight numbers, sometimes for example, you'll get a 17 out of 20 on a quiz and you want to know what percent did you get, okay? So that can be written as 85 over 100, which is an equivalent fraction, but it's also equal to 85%. Okay, so when we convert a fraction to a decimal, so let's say we have 3/4 and we want to convert that to a decimal. Well, remember that decimals are always in powers of 10. So this is tenths place, this is the hundredths place, right? Thousandths place. So if we can get our denominator, just find an equivalent fraction that is a multiple of 10, that's going to make our job really easy. So we could start with 10, but 4 doesn't go into 10 evenly. So let's try adding another 0. 4 does go into 100 evenly by 25. 4 times 25 is 100. So if we multiply the top number by 25 also, we would get 75. So 3/4 is equivalent to 75 over 100. So now the cool thing about that is, however many zeros are there, that is the number of spaces you're going to have to the right of the decimal. And then you're just going to fill your number in, just like that. Okay? So we can do another example of that. Let's say we have 2/5. Okay. Now 5 can go into 10. Always start with your tens. 5 times 2 is 10. So 2 times 2 is 4. There's only 1 0. So to the right of the decimal, you're going to have 1 space, and we're just going to fill in the 4. Now, those are both examples of numbers where the denominator goes into a power of 10 pretty easily. That's obviously not always going to be the case. So if you have a number that does not, let's say, let's do 3 divided by 8. Okay, so 8 doesn't go into 10 evenly. It doesn't go into 100 evenly. It does go into 1,000 evenly, but you may not know that, right? So since you are able to use a calculator, all you're doing is dividing. So remember that 3 divided by 8. Remember, this line means divide by. Okay? So, and you would get 0.375. Okay, so that is fractions to decimals. Now let's do decimals to fractions, which is even easier. So let's say you have the number 0.573. Okay, remember the rule from above. However many spaces to the right of the decimal is how many zeros are going to be behind your 1 in the denominator. Because this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, we have thousandths over here, and we just put that 573 up top. Okay? So let's do one more. The decimal to a fraction is actually pretty easy. So if you had 0.64, there are 2 spaces to the right, so that'd be 2 zeros on the bottom. Now, that is a fraction that is simplifiable, so we could go ahead and simplify those both by 2, and we would get 32 over 50, but that's simplifiable again by 2, and we would get 16 over 25. If you change it into a fraction, you are going to want to simplify that fraction as far as you can go. Okay, that's just a habit you should get into. Okay, how about a fraction to a percent? Now, you want to use what you've got up here because we know that percents, the word percent is actually Latin. Here's your Latin for the day. It means per 100. Okay, so percents are always out of 100. So let's say you get a 7 out of 10 on a quiz. Okay, well, we want that to be over 100 because percents are always out of 100, right? So to get from 10 to 100, we multiply by 10. And that means we multiply the top by 10. So 7 times 10 is 70. And then we can convert that to just 70%. Some of my students have given me a little thing before that the line in between the percent is like the 1 over here, and then that's a 0, and that's a 0. So that's kind of a little visual you can use if you need to. Okay, so what about this problem above where we had 3 over 8 equals 0.375, right? So what if we wanted to change that 3 over 8 to a percentage? So we can get it to be a decimal, right? But what that really means is 375 over 1,000. Well, since percentages are always out of 100, that means we need to drag that decimal point back 1 space, okay? So that's the equivalent of 37.5%, okay? And the last thing we're going to do is do a decimal to a percent, which is pretty easy. So let's say we have 0.43, and we're going to change that to a percent. Remember what I said, that the number of spaces to the right is the number of zeros behind the 1 in the denominator. So anytime you have 2 digits to the right, that's what's going to go right above 100, and that means your percent is just 43%. Lots of people get stuck on things like this, 0.08, okay? And they'll say, oh, that's 80%, but it's really not. So even if you put the 0 in front of that, 0 can be a placeholder, right? So that means 8 out of 100, so that is just 8%. Anytime you have a single digit like this, like an 8 over 100, that's going to be 0.0 and then that number. What if you have more than two numbers to the right of the decimal, sorry. Let's say you have 0.3629, okay? Well, remember that this would be, and you're not going to write this every time, but just to get you to understand it, that would be 3629 over a 1 and 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros, right? We need it to be right there. So if I drag this one back 2, I need to drag this one back 2. So our percentage would be, 36.29%. Okay. Last example would be, what if we have 4.75? Okay. So essentially what you're doing when you're converting from a decimal to a percent, sorry, my dog's barking in the background, is that you are moving that decimal 2 spaces to the right. So that rule is going to hold here also, okay? 2 spaces to the right, so that would be actually 475%. Remember that 100% written as a decimal is equal to 1.00. So any percentage that you have, any number that you have greater than 1 is going to be a percentage greater than 100. Okay, that's your notes for today. Bye.